Welcome to Unit 2, Lesson 1, Soil Basics. So this is going to be a very abbreviated Soils 101, just to get you a little bit more knowledgeable about soil in general and how everything is working underground. So soil is a very valuable natural resource. It takes thousands of years to form topsoil, and we have a very finite amount of it available to us to grow crops on the planet. So it's something that we all need to be careful with and take good care of. So what is soil? So soil is made up of living and non-living components, and if we look at the non-living components, we're looking at primarily mineral matter, organic matter, and then air spaces for water and for oxygen. Where does soil come from? Well, that mineral matter is coming from the breakdown of rocks, and depending on the rocks in the area, that's what your soils are going to be made of. So an area with basalt rocks and granite is going to have soils that are made up of those minerals and are often more sandy. And then if you have soils that are limestone, then your soils are going to be more clayey, and again, a breakdown of those materials. If you look at the soil profile, this is the picture on the left. This is what a cross-section of soil might look like, and you can see the differences in both color, matter, and material as you start from the A horizon and go down to the C horizon. The A horizon is the area where we're going to focus most of our attention as gardeners and farmers, because that's where you have the most accumulation of decomposed matter, so organic matter, and also where your topsoil is generally going to be the finest and the most workable and has been supporting plant life for the longest amount of time. So the mineral particles in the soil are going to be broken down into three different size ranges depending on the parent material. So this can go from sand to silt to clay, and you can see from this picture sand is the largest particle size, followed by silt, and then finally clay, and clay is very small. And the proportion of these three materials in a soil is known as the soil texture. Now, why is it important to talk about texture? Well, that's because your texture has a direct impact on how much water your soil can hold and release or make available to plants, how often you're going to have to water, how tightly nutrients are held onto and or released to your plants, how permeable that soil is, how workable it might be in the spring, and the ability of plants to grow and form roots in that soil. So it's very important to know what is your soil's texture. So you can actually assess your soil's texture at home, and we have posted a soil texture activities chart on the course website. Download that, print it out, or just read it. And there's going to be two different methods. One is using the feel method, so basically making a mud pie and using just your fingers to actually determine the texture of your soil using a flow chart. The second, and I think is the most fun, especially for a family, is the jar method. And we go through step by step the instructions on how to do this, but all you really need is a jar, some water, your soil, and a little time to wait and see what the breakdown of your soil might be. And you can see in this picture, after time, the sand is going to settle at the bottom, followed by the finer sands, the silt, and the clay. And by looking at that, you can figure out pretty closely what your proportion or percentage of those materials are in your soil. So texture is something you don't have a lot of control over. You really can't change the amount of sand, silt, or clay in your soil, and you probably shouldn't try or things can get really strange. But what you do have control over is the structure of your soil, how those particles fit together and how they're glued together with soil organic matter. So I like to think of the ideal soil structure as a cake. You've got a lot of room for pores. It's very aerated. Infiltration of water and nutrients is very easy, and weeds are discouraged. Here's a picture of what I'm talking about. See that light, fluffy structure? The particles are all around the same size. There's no crusting at the top of the soil. Those roots are completely unimpeded. They can grow wherever they want, and they're interacting with the natural fungi and bacteria that are in that soil. This is just a very healthy, happy soil ecosystem. So soil organic matter is really the magic component of soil, and it can account for anywhere from 0 to 5% of the soil or more, depending on where you are in the country and what you've been doing to take care of your soil. Typically, it's mostly made up of partially decomposed plant and animal material, and in nature, it is mostly occurring from plant leaves, roots, and stems that are dying and continually being turned back into the soil. So why does it matter so much? Well, for a few reasons. So soil organic matter is a storehouse for your plant nutrients, and it really encourages that soil biological activity. The more organic matter you have in the soil, the more active you are going to have microbes and insects and other critters and bacteria and fungi working to break that down and turn it into nutrients that plants can use. Whether your soil is a sticky clay or a really fast draining dry sand, soil organic matter is going to help with both of those issues. It's going to make more of a physical structure in that sandy soil, help it to hold water and minerals and nutrients, and then in a really sticky clay soil, it's going to lighten that structure and allow for more infiltration of water. So it really improves all soil texture and even pH issues. And so maintaining and building and improving and keeping your soil organic matter is really one of your most important goals when we're looking at soil management. So we talked a little bit about the non-living components of soil. What about the living components? So a healthy soil is going to have an abundant amount of life going on under the soil surface. You won't see it very often, but knowing that it's there, it's going to help you quite a bit. So we're talking about things that you can see, some macroorganisms like insects, earthworms, crustaceans like roly-polies, other spiders and things like that that are beneficial. And we're also talking about the ones that you can't see, so bacteria, fungi, and some of the microscopic organisms like beneficial nematodes. So a single square yard of soil could contain anywhere from 500 to 200,000 different individual arthropods, so that's insects and their friends. And it could contain over 2,000 pounds of bacteria in an acre of soil. And this might seem a little bit scary, but these are all really important beneficial things that are happening in the soil. And here's just a diagram of what that could look like. So you have everything from a mole to a microbe as part of that healthy soil ecosystem. And you can see as plants and animals die and are decomposed, they're turned back into nutrients, which then feed the plants, and the cycle continues. So we really want to have an active, healthy, living soil to have the best plants that we can have. Now just a little bit about pH before we close. So soil pH is a measure of the active hydrogen in a soil, but where it really matters to you as a gardener is that plant species have different adaptations that allow them to grow and thrive at different pH levels, whether it be acidic, neutral, or alkaline. And in many parts of Idaho, we have alkaline or basic soils, and certain plants like blueberries, rhododendrons, cranberries, even some of the apple trees and other fruits tend to fare less well in these alkaline soil conditions, and they develop iron deficiencies and other issues. So those are really, well, maybe not apples, but the berries in particular, blueberries, cranberries, really can only be grown successfully in the northern, more forested regions of the state where our soils tend to be more acidic. So what are we talking about? If you measure the pH of a soil, anywhere from 0 to 6.9% is considered acidic, 7 is neutral, and 7 plus is alkaline or basic. And most plant life likes to grow about 6.5 to 6.8 or 7. That doesn't mean that you can't grow when your garden starts to reach 8 or even 8.5 like it tends to do in southwest Idaho. It just means that you have to pay attention to the kinds of plants that you are choosing, and you may need to make some amendments. And we have attached a PowerPoint presentation in PDF form that goes into some of these issues in much greater detail, and we've made that available on the website for you to go through at your own pace. It is a little bit more technical information, so we did not include it in this intro PowerPoint. So most of our Idaho soils are going to be neutral to basic with a few pockets of acidity, and that would be more in the northern and central part of the state. And part of the reason that this happens is that micronutrient availability is very much dependent on pH. So the higher a pH, generally the less available iron, magnesium, and zinc might be, and then you'll start to see those deficiencies in your plants. So I've included more information on this, like I said, in the other more in-depth soil fertility slide set, but a laboratory soil test is going to be the most reliable way for you to analyze your soil. There are lots of home kits out there, and you'll see them at garden centers and big box stores. For the most part, they are really not worth the money. They're not very reliable. At best, they would just give you an inkling of some of your levels, but the best way to do it is to take a nice random sizable sample of your soil through multiple areas of the yard, mix them together, take out about 2 pints, and take it to a reliable soil lab. You can do this through University of Idaho Extension, or depending on where you live in the state, there are private soil labs also that know your soils very well. And this will give you official laboratory tested data on your soil's texture, its pH, the nutrients that are available or expected to become available in that sample. It'll alert you to any salt or nutrient imbalances, and often it will also give you some fertilizer recommendations based on your particular soil conditions. So it's about $45 to $50 for a test depending on where you live, and can be a very valuable tool in helping you to understand your soil. So that's it for part 1. Stay tuned for part 2, where we talk about soil in more garden terms.